Good evening and welcome to SBS World News Australia. I'm Anton Enos.
And I'm Nina Merata. Supporters of Iran's reformist opposition are defying a crackdown on election protests as the country's political crisis enters a fifth day. They're planning another demonstration in Tehran following rival rallies held by supporters and opponents of President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. The defiance comes despite further arrests, bans on the foreign media, and a call for calm by Iran's supreme leader.
A fourth day of protest on the streets of Tehran. This was a peaceful and orderly rally with no apparent repeat of the violence seen after previous protests over Iran's disputed election result. The defeated presidential challenger Mir Hossein Mousavi didn't show up and even urged his supporters to stay away and avoid clashes. But they came anyway. These are amateur pictures of the latest election protest. Iran's Islamic rulers are cracking down on foreign media coverage and attempting to reclaim the streets. These are the images the Ayatollahs want the world to see as supporters of Iran's President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad staged a rival rally in Tehran. They blame foreigners and the opposition for stirring up trouble in Iran. People are being warned not to hold unauthorized rallies, and foreign reporters are now banned from covering them.
هر کسی که قرار است تجمعی، راهپیمایی و مراسمی داشته باشه باید مجوز لازم رو کسب کنه. در غیر این صورت نیروی انتظامی حتما برخورد قانونی میکنه.
And Iran's intelligence minister warned of more arrests after dozens of so-called provocative agents were rounded up. But Iran's young, well-educated and tech-savvy protesters are finding ways around government-imposed restrictions, posting pictures taken on mobile phones onto video-sharing websites like YouTube. These images seemingly show spontaneous protests at a railway station and an Iranian university. New pictures have also emerged of injured protesters in earlier protests and the apparent shooting of several people when violence broke out. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has appealed for calm. He called on Iran's people to renounce tension and riots and support the Islamic Republic. But Iran's rulers appear to be split over how to deal with the protesters, despite their attempt to defuse tensions through the offer of a partial vote recount. There are fears of a further crackdown, amid warnings that a so-called velvet revolution won't be tolerated. Vesna Nazil, World News Australia.
International reaction to the crisis in Iran is also intensifying. While world leaders are cautiously monitoring developments, Iranians outside the country and their supporters have come out in force.
Iranians living in exile were joined by thousands of supporters at protests in several countries. Whatever the language, the slogans were universal in support of the pro-reform demonstrators in Iran. Where's my vote becoming the catch cry of a growing movement convinced the weekend elections were rigged. But as the regime cracks down on the groundswell of opposition in Iran, there's also growing concern.
We are afraid because we have all my cousins, all my family is there because we can't contact them. We have no contact with them. So we hope it will change. This time it will change. That's what we hope. That's what we pray day and night.
While admitting to some concerns about the disputed election result, the US president stopped short of suggesting it was rigged, clearly wary of aligning himself with the protest movement.
It's not productive, given the history of U.S.-Iranian relations, to be seen as meddling, the U.S. president meddling in Iranian elections.
He was critical, though, of any violence directed at peaceful protests and said events revealed an enthusiasm for democratic change in Iran. Refusing to bow to the protesters, President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad kept to his schedule, travelling abroad to attend a summit. He made no reference to the crisis at home, instead turning his sights on the United States.
America is in the grasp of an economic and political crisis, and the allies of the United States are also unable to cope with this crisis. It is evident that the end of empires is coming.
Resident in the US, the exiled former Crown Prince of Iran thinks there's revolution in the air.
It is clear that the genie is out of the bottle.
And many believe the momentum for change is greater than at any time since his family was exiled in 1979. Jane Braslin, World News, Australia.
About 300 demonstrators have turned out in Melbourne to protest against alleged vote rigging in the Iranian presidential election. Young and old expatriates were part of a chorus of people calling for an end to street violence and a recount of the votes.
It was a peaceful turnout, hundreds singing the Iranian national anthem on the steps of Melbourne's Federation Square.
This demonstration was organized mainly to reflect the protests of Iranian people inside Iran, to help their voice to be heard.
It's the latest in a string of international protests over alleged vote rigging in Iran's presidential election. Protesters say it's also a way of condemning the violent upheaval on the streets of Tehran.
The people here today say they want to draw attention to what's happening in Iran. For many, this is an act of solidarity, but there's also frustration over an election they believe was unjust.
Iranian Australians in Melbourne believe the election was rigged.
This is an objection to the election, which was a complete sham.
I voted for Mir Hossein Mousavi, but I believe that they actually cheated in the election and they manipulated the results.
The protest was flagged on the internet social networking site Facebook, supporting others already monitoring news on sites such as Twitter.
I've got a Twitter page actually as well, and that's where we get our main source of news at the moment because they can't communicate any other way.
And technology is helping mobilise protesters.
And because everybody's on Twitter and Facebook and MySpace and they receive SMSs and emails, you could really gather as many people as you would find interested in taking part.
Australian Iranians say they'll continue to demonstrate on behalf of those who can't in Iran. Jeanette Francis, World News Australia.
And we have plenty more on that unfolding situation. Just go to SBS Online for a special feature on the protests, including latest